This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Welcome to A Silent War Within. We are so happy to have you. Kim, how are you today?
I'm pretty good, Kev. Happy to be here.
Yeah, guess what? We're on TikTok and Facebook now, and over the course of about 6 days, and combined on all those pages, we've had over 15,000 views.
Makes me so excited. I can't wait to provide more content for our listeners, and I hope so much that everything that we're doing together is making a difference in our colleagues' lives.
And guys, we've got some fantastic guests coming up. We've got the Salty Paramedic. We've got Catherine Payton. We've got Daniel Sundial from Dan Sun Photography. We're really excited about that one. We've got Logan Lancaster. If you don't know who these people are, look them up on TikTok and Facebook. You'll find some amazing content from these, what I would consider experts in their field. And today we have Dr. Sarita Wilson-Anderson from Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. She is the spiritual care director. We wanted to have her on because she's a dear friend of ours, but also because she brings such empathy, caring, and compassion nature to the world in general. And she's got a beautiful smile. Dr. Sarita, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into spiritual care, because you're the spiritual care chaplain and director at a very large children's hospital, correct?
Absolutely. I have been the director of spiritual care here at Le Bonheur since 2018, I believe. But before that, I was a frontline chaplain on our neonatal unit. So I've been here going on 16 years. And loaded question about how I got started. When we talk about being called, this was not what I thought I would be doing for a large portion of my life, and never knew that this would be a profession or a career. Had a career in several other different industries, but I was in ministry and was led into this, was called into this as I felt the call, as I felt the pull, and I felt a way that God was kind of really integrating all of the other things I'd done in my life into this work. And so I got to a place where I was introduced to chaplaincy by one of my former pastors, my father in ministry, and he connected me here at Methodist with the right people, and I started learning about what a professional chaplain does and fell in love with it. And it's been my journey for the past several years now.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
awesome. So how does all that, the social aspect of that, your previous work history, how does that connect when you see first responders and hospital staff coming to you in possibly moments of crisis or things they've seen that is damaging to their mental health and their spiritual health? How do you deal with that? How does all that experience coincide with meeting them where they are?
That's a good question. So one of the things you learn as you go through training and residency in professional chaplaincy is how to interact with people from all different faith groups, people from all different walks of life, without judgment, but just understanding that we are all spiritual people. We are all spiritual beings. So it's not necessarily about a person's religion, but it's about meeting people where they are and journeying with them. What I have learned is that we encounter people probably on the worst day of their lives. Nobody wants anything to happen to their children, whether it's a broken pinky fingernail or something very critical. For that parent, it's the worst day of their lives. And so learning to journey with people, this is a journey. We're not here to proselytize. We're not here to convert anybody. We're here to help them navigate their own spiritual questions as they go through this process with the illness or critical issue that is concerning their child. And so when you talk about all of the different things, we live in Memphis, right? So you're talking about so many different social things that are happening, so many different barriers to healthcare, so many different barriers to even spirituality. Because when we talk about spirituality, that's the thing that gives each person purpose. It's what drives us. It's what puts our feet on the floor. And so when a critical issue happens, somebody's spirituality has been shaken. Their purpose has been shaken. Their core has been shaken. Their life has been disrupted. That's their spiritual being. And so as chaplains, you learn to journey with people, to sit with people, and not to give them the answers, because some of the things we see, there's just no logical, reasonable answer to understand what has happened. But you help them to kind of process step by step what that means for them and where their life goes from here.
I absolutely love that you identify us as spiritual beings and spiritual creatures. I think that that is oftentimes very looked over. I think that we're kind of identified a little bit as either just the human side or just the mental side. I don't think there's enough focus that we are spiritual creatures. And when we have some type of grief or injury to our morality, and our way of thinking, it really changes us on a spiritual level. I can certainly attest that through all my years of experience, there's been numerous times that I can look back now. You know, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
I can always look back now and see the times where I was spiritually altered by what I saw or what I encountered. And, you know, like we've talked about with other guests, there was a time when we didn't have any grief counseling, we didn't have any of that. We didn't have any mental health, you know, just in the last 10 years that has more come to fruition in Frontlines than it has been in the past. So the way you described us, this holistic approach, this spiritual kind of being, I think is very essential. I think it makes us think about the specific kind of weight some of our providers carry, especially when it comes to loss. And I know that you see a lot of that.
Yeah.
For me to see that as often as you do would be very morally taxing, mentally taxing, spiritually, emotional. Like I would just be dead every day. Whether it's a paramedic that may have run a pediatric code or a nurse that's lost a long-term patient, that grief feels different. So how do you kind of mentor that? How do you bring that back? What options do you give people to kind of deal with that type of loss and that type of grief that we have in our positions?
I like that question. One thing is that we all handle grief and loss very differently. And the reality is when we come to work, when you're working on the front lines, when you're working as a nurse or paramedic, even a physician, you carry your own grief in the background. We all have our own personal losses, whether it's the loss of a family member, whether it's the loss of a hope, a dream. We carry grief in our being. And so recognizing and one, giving people space to have that, to be human and to have that grief, realizing that no matter how much we see it, we're not machines. And at some point, it's going to pierce our heart in a healthy way, or we're going to respond very adversely or negatively or in an unhealthy manner. And so one is after we do our work, after we take care of our patients, giving space to our frontline team, our healthcare providers, to be able to process, wow, that was hard. Oh, that hit me deep. That really informed something in me. That reminded me of such and such. I have a daughter that same age. That could have been anything. And allowing them that space to process. And then providing as much as we can the healthy ways to cope, because the reality is, as this is our work, we still have to go take care of the next patient. And we can't forget what we've seen. We can't unsee it. We can't unfeel it. So acknowledging the reality of what we've seen, how we've experienced it, how we've felt, and so that we can process it or at least breathe through it in a healthy way to continue to do our work and to continue to do our jobs and do them well, which kind of helps eradicate room for error because we've taken time to breathe through it, process through it. One of the things I encourage my team of chaplains to do is called the pause, because at the end of the day, when a child dies, that's somebody's child. That's somebody's son. That's somebody's daughter, grandchild, sister, brother. And it's a life. And so instead of just rushing to, okay, next room, another trauma coming in, we get that. But we're going to take a minute and pause and just like, let's just all take a moment. It doesn't have to be a religious moment. It can or cannot be a prayer, whatever is good for whoever is there. And especially if families in the room, let's just take a minute. Let's take a deep breath. Let's pause. Let's honor the life of this young boy, this young girl, who literally just passed away before we move to the next thing. And that helps center everybody in the room. Uh-oh, I haven't been moving, and so my light just went off.
That's all right.
That just centers everybody in the room and in the space to take a deep breath, to center themselves, to reground themselves, and to refocus to go to the next thing.
I guess my question for you in that is, what do you do to stay grounded yourself? I can remember a time in my career, my very first pediatric cardiac arrest as a paramedic, and I was forever altered. I mean, it was something I'll never forget. I can still close my eyes and see that little boy's face. And I think that's something that first responders and healthcare workers share a good bit. I think that we all have those patients that we kind of hold on to, and to see the really, for lack of better terminology, the unimaginable loss that you see almost on a daily basis. What are some of your tricks to stay as cool and calm and collected as you are, and to not go into a full mental health crisis? Because I feel like that's where I would be if I saw that kind of thing every single day, and that was my area of expertise.
Yeah. There are no tricks. There are no tricks. You learn a lot over the years, and you learn that every situation is different and there's always something to learn. So one is that I've allowed myself to learn something, to glean something, to take something from every family I encounter. One, realizing that it's a gift to be with families in these difficult times. It's a special calling, and it's a sacred time. Even as hard or as traumatic as it may be, it's still sacred because life is sacred. Two is that I always remember my first patient death. I will never forget that sound, but that stays with me in a way that's very humanistic, so that I remember, okay, this is not just a case number. This is not all of that. This is a person with a name. We saw them as a patient, but this is a child with a name. So to remember the humanity of that, and then to allow myself space after I take care of everybody else, after I check on everybody else, after I make sure everybody else in the room is good, then I allow myself some time. It may be 2 minutes. It might be a bathroom break where I just go take 5 deep breaths and come back out, but to allow myself to breathe. And then when I'm off my shift, I make sure that I practice not only good self-care, but also self-comfort. 2 separate things. Self-comfort is the things that just gratify me in the moment, that just feel good. But then self-care, the things that I really do to take care of myself holistically, spirit, soul, and body. And that could include eating well, drinking water, resting, spending time with my family or my friends, listening to music, taking a walk. One of the gifts that we have here that a lot of people don't take care of when the weather is not too hot and not too cold is to go outside and walk on Le Bonheur Green.
Yes.
And there are times when between all of the busyness, sometimes I allow myself to take 10 or 15 minutes to just go take a walk and come back in. I think we discount the value of the little things, and we're always looking, well, I got to go to Jamaica. I need a real trip.
Right.
And those things are
Right.
great, but in the moment we can't do those things. But we have to take that 5, 10, 15 minutes, that we have to take that 30 seconds and not negate the importance of those minutes that we have, and not overlooking the little things. As my mother used to say, seeing the forest for the trees. The big things
Yes.
are important, but we can't get to them immediately. So take in the little moments, the sacred moments, the aha God moments, the God notes, and breathing and allowing ourselves that space, because we don't always have the luxury patient to patient to do that. But it's important to recenter ourselves.
And I think that's one of the things that the group of people that we're really trying to appeal to try to get this in every hospital, to try to get this message that we're bringing into every firehouse, to every EMS station, every police station, to every dispatch center. One of the things that I think we struggle with the most is, instead of having things that gratify us and make us feel good, those things kind of go away, and then we start to replace those things with things that have negative consequences. When you encounter somebody, what do you say to someone who is, I guess, using those, the alcohol, the drugs, the things that we're replacing those moments with, where we're really struggling with something, and our gratification is coming from, even sexual stuff, even all these things that we can fill in that blank that are negative to us. How do you tell somebody that, maybe this is not the right way to handle this?
Yeah, I think we have to learn how to not confront people judgmentally, but recognize and realize that those unhealthy coping mechanisms come from somewhere else within them. Something has happened in their past, something has happened in their childhood. They've had a traumatic experience that triggers that unhealthy behavior, or that elicits that unhealthy behavior. And so helping people realize this is not healthy, because sometimes people don't even realize it's not healthy, or that they are doing it, or that they've become so dependent on it that it has become a coping mechanism. And so being able to have those safe spaces and safe but difficult conversations, and helping people to realize that they're doing that, and then offering support and resources, and sometimes realizing that it's beyond our scope, but hey, these are the resources I have. I will walk with you. I will be with you. I will go with you. But this is unhealthy, and this is why. And helping people see the larger picture in that. And so when I talked a little bit ago about self-comfort versus self-care, we are mistaking some of those comforting things for care. They feel good in the moment, but that moment ends, and then you're still dealing with the situation. Whereas with self-care, if you take care of yourself well enough to address or name the feeling, they say name it to tame it, and all of those things, address what you feel instead of masking it, hiding behind it, which is what a lot of healthcare providers do. We mask it, we hide behind it, we act as though it didn't exist, and we build this hard shell, and then we do all the negative things. And then after a while, we have these dependencies, codependencies, addictions to a lot of different things. It could be as addictive to shopping. I mean, it may not be the things that we consider so negative. I mean, it could be, overeating or not eating, or eating and not sleeping, all of those things that really are not healthy. And we recognize it, but we play it off.
I feel so personally attacked on so many levels currently.
Well, listen, I can say those things because I'm a shopper. I am a retail therapy girl.
There are 3 Amazon packages waiting at my door right now that when I get home, that's what I'm most excited about.
Yes.
But I guess that kind of brings up another question. Is there a happy medium? So I am a bourbon whiskey collector. I don't drink it often, but I like the bottles. I like the story behind the whiskeys. Is there that happy medium? Or even in my case, am I doing it for the wrong reasons? Do you feel like that those that get into something like that are setting themselves up for failure? Because oftentimes I feel like, what if? One of the calls that I remember most vividly is a girl who had been through a multitude of traumas. We're not going to get into details, but multitude of very bad traumas with members of her family doing things to her and things like that. So very traumatic experience. And her brain had an off switch, and she was just completely catatonic. So I guess I see myself sometimes finding myself falling into the what ifs, like, what if I have another bad call? What if I have another horrible experience? What if my mind clicks that switch that says, you just need to drink until you're drunk, which I've been there in my life. Don't get me wrong, but certainly not there now. So I guess, is there that happy medium where you can maintain kind of an interest in something and not use it inappropriately? And many will say yes, but sometimes I've found that creates kind of an avenue for people to run down when things are really bad.
Yeah, you have to know yourself. So self-awareness is key. I would say, yes, there is a happy medium, but anything we do in obsession or to an extreme, one end or the other, is not healthy for us on either end. And then we have to be able to address the real issue. That happy medium does exist, but you have to be self-aware enough to know when you're tipping on one side or the other. And then you have to be able to know yourself well enough to know when you're in that space. We see a lot of traumatic things. We see a lot of things. And then we have to realize that happened to that person, but it did not happen to me. And so we cannot allow the feelings of what happened. And because a lot of times we don't have good boundaries as healthcare workers. And
You're right.
It's all about our boundaries. And so you have to know what to leave at work and what you do bring home, how to process it in a healthy way so that you don't allow those things to happen to you. But you have to be able to say, I was with this family, I was with this person, saw this through my eyes and not theirs. And at the end of the day, this is not my story. This is their narrative. And so I still have to live my story, my narrative. That might become part of the fabric of how I work and my being, but it's not me. And so I cannot assume all of that level of trauma, because that is when we get into vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, and that's where we become very unhealthy. So we have to talk about healthy boundaries. And when we leave work, leaving it at work. And that comes from healthy processing, debriefing, having safe places to talk. One of the things I know happens here with my team and several other teams is realizing that some other people in other disciplines or other people in our lives will not fully understand what we do every day. And so it's healthier for us to talk about it here, have safe spaces, talk about it with colleagues, as opposed to allowing that to spill over into other places in our lives. So boundaries.
I gotcha.
So
Yeah.
basing off of that, Sarita, I had a thought. I know a lot of us want to maintain a good balance between one another, between work life and home life. And I try as best as I can before I come home to decompress. But I've also noticed that when we've had really tough calls and I come home, I haven't quite finished decompressing yet. And I think a lot of us want to guard our spouses and our kids from the passive trauma that we've incurred for the day. But it's hard because, we work these 12-hour shifts and we come home, everybody's excited to see us and they want to see the smile on our face, but that's not what they're always met with. And I know a lot of us feel very guilty because we're not bouncing through the door with that smile that they're wanting to see after all of that time. What is a way, or do you have any ways that we can include our family in that, but not spill all of the trauma for the day to where, because I know I personally have a tendency to where I withdraw when I come home. Like I'll go get in the bath and I'll want to kind of take some space away from everybody. But a lot of that is that guarding that I do. I don't want my kids to see me cry or sad, or I want to decompress that alone because I don't want to create unhealthy behaviors within my own family. Do you have any recommendations to where they wouldn't feel pushed away like that, and maybe a way that even with my spouse that we can connect but still keep a separation?
I think it just comes from healthy and very clear communication, understanding what you do and saying, being able to come home and say, hey, I've had a really tough day. I will talk to you about it later. I don't want to push you away. Can you give me a few minutes? One of the things I used to do when my children were little, they're adults now, but I would literally sit in the car for an extra 10 minutes when I first got home. And you may not get it all out at that time, and that's real, but to give myself that space, even after the drive home, taking a few breaths before I actually walk into the house. And then saying, one of the things I've learned, I read this somewhere and it has really worked for me, is I say to myself, this thought can wait. And I compartmentalize those thoughts. And then when I spend my time with my family, my spouse, my children when they were little, doing the other things I have to do. And then I allot time to come back to reframe those things, to process those things, to decompress a little bit more. And I give myself that time, and I allot that self my time. And instead of guarding myself from my family, I guard that time that I've set aside for them to come back to later. That's been helpful for me. So that's one way I think that has been really helpful. But I literally have had to say to myself sometimes, this thought can wait. So I start to have, thoughts about what happened during the day internally. This thought can wait. And then I come back to it. And that allows me to reframe it. And also just reframing verbally, sometimes we say it was a really bad day, it was a tough day, but there's also something good in that day too. And there's something somewhere that brought joy or a smile somewhere, even if it was just like walking to the car and getting a deep breath, fresh air, whatever. And so finding joy somewhere in that day, in the little bit of the day, so that we don't allow the experience, albeit hard, difficult, traumatic, to control the entire outlook and perspective that we have. Because when we go home, we do get to see people we love. We do get to hug people, and that somebody else didn't get that opportunity to do that today. And so being able to say, I need a minute. It's been a day, but I'm glad to see you. And loving and hugging on them for a minute, then coming back to it.
To a place of gratitude.
Gratitude, absolutely. And gratitude is found in little things. It's not always the big things. It's not always the expensive things. It's, the very little things, the things we take for granted. There's gratitude and there's joy in those.
Do you know what I have found? And Kim, you can't use this one, but what I have found I don't know, refreshing, relieving. I don't know the right adjective to put there. But when I come home and it's been a really hard day, and today's going to be one of those days. It's been a really tough day today around here. It's been hard. It's been a lot of emotion. So it's been a really emotionally exhausting day. And one of the things that I look forward to is getting home, and I have a 4-year-old son, and his discovery of the world is the most refreshing thing. And when you said we take so many things for granted, one of the things that popped in my mind was, one of the things I love about watching him grow up is that the things I take so for granted, he's discovering for the first time. So he sees a leaf and it's the most beautiful thing to him. He's so excited about this leaf. And I'm like, you know what? That leaf is kind of cool. I can see where he's discovering those things, or he built something and he's so excited that he built something. And I'm like, it's just a bunch of blocks stuck together. I don't see the allure in it, but to him, it's something so giant and so magnificent. And so I love that innocent mind. He doesn't have that, the day's hard, the day's long, the day's emotional. He is simply right there in the moment, enjoying what he's enjoying. And I love that. I love coming home to that. So Kim doesn't have any little ones anymore, so she can't enjoy that. She does have a grandbaby though, so you can enjoy that a little bit.
Well, you know what, though? I'm with Kim. I don't have little people anymore, but sometimes just walking around our hospital environment, I don't know if you guys have ever been on the lobby level where there's the lights, the silhouettes on in the hallway.
Yeah.
Some days I go outside, go out of my office, and I see a little kid playing there and just smiling and I'm like, wow, that just blessed my whole day. And because we see sick kids, we see kids that have been through so much, but sometimes seeing them walk the simple things and playing and all that, finding those little things is like the best thing in the world. That never gets old to me. I saw a little boy not too long ago and I just said hi to him and it was just like, the best thing in the world. Hi. I was like, oh, he was so cute. And so it's not even finding those little moments. It's seeing those little moments and embracing them.
But I just love that. I felt like I needed to share that when you said we take so much for granted.
Yeah.
One of the things that you do in your job and we just talked about it a little bit, one of the best things about being in pediatrics, and I think Kim can agree, the best and the worst thing sometimes are the families. So we love the families, but at the same time, the families can be difficult. The families can make our job harder. But one of the things for me, and actually a few months ago, and I had to talk to my therapist about this pretty in detail, that I saw a commercial on TV and it was a commercial for a wreck, like those commercials that are like PSAs to say drive safely, don't drunk drive kind of thing. And the background noise of the commercial was clearly a mother's scream that had just lost her child. And for those of you listening who have never heard that, I thank God that you haven't heard that, because that's a sound you don't forget. I felt the heart rate increase. I felt my skin start to crawl, like very triggered by that sound. One of the things that you do very well, and I've seen this for myself, is you counsel families really well in that moment of grief and particularly profound grief. It's not always, grief because they got a bad diagnosis and there's hope. Sometimes it is a very hopeless situation. All has been lost, that kind of thing. So how do you handle those families? How do you take that and handle that in such a soft way? Because obviously our audience are going to be people who are handling families on their worst days. So what advice could you give us about how you deal with that profound grief from families?
I think one of the main things is not to try to explain it for them. Some things are inexplicable. Some things don't make sense. Some things have no answer. So that's the first thing. So we can't try to find the answers for them, justify it, make it make sense. It just doesn't. And then just empathy, compassion, and just being human in that moment with them, being present. Sometimes you don't have to say a word. You don't have to try to find the words. You don't have to make up anything. You don't come with all the platitudes, you just let it be. People grieve differently from culture to culture, from situation to situation. And so not allowing ourselves to have a formed thought about how they should act, how they shouldn't act, letting people be in whatever that needs to be in that moment, as long as it's not hurting them physically, as long as it's not hurting anybody else, as long as it's not destructive, giving people space to just be. I don't care how prepared we think we are for a situation, you never know how you're going to respond until you're in it. And so allowing that to happen organically and naturally, as difficult as that is, we can't control grief. And the more we try to control it, the more heightened it becomes for a lot of people in that moment. And realizing this is just the start of we're here on the top of them getting news, receiving news, experiencing these events. They have a lifetime to deal with this. Let them have this moment as they hear the news, as they experience the loss, and then helping them navigate it from here. Sitting with them, following up is very important, because when a child dies here, they're not just a number. And so it's really, really important that they get the cards that we send 2 or 3 months down the road, a year from now. It's really important that they get a phone call that says, hey, we know that was really hard. Just want you to know we're thinking of you. And that's part of what we do as spiritual care too, and working with other teams like palliative care to provide that additional layer of support, so they know that we didn't just take care of them from the moment. We really care about what has happened to their family.
Sure.
It's true that the deeper sense of loss beyond the patient themselves is something that a lot of us grapple with. And when you're also deeply engaged with the families and their rawest moments of loss, that connection creates another layer of experience. Could you share how you approach engaging with families in their profound grief, especially in our setting, and what unique expressions of sorrow do you often witness with them?
Wow. That question alone is pretty deep and profound. You know, I remember one family very distinctly. Their 9-year-old died very suddenly. He was asthmatic and did not recover from a really bad asthma attack. And the grief, you know, he was supposed to graduate from elementary school, the promotion that year, and all of those types of things. So realizing that when the child dies, you lose hopes, you lose dreams, you lose the future, you lose graduations, you lose proms, you lose all of those types of things that you had hopes and plans for. You lose sports, basketball team, cheerleading, all of those things that you had them involved in. And so one of the sweetest things I remember was that class at that school during their 5th grade promotion still had a chair with his name on it, and still allowed that space for that mother to have that. And that was important because they didn't forget him. So little things work very differently. We offer support. We call it Threads of Hope. And we have it once a month, in person or online. And families are welcome to come. They can come 5 years from now if they want to, because grief ebbs and flows, and it doesn't end just because it's been a year or it's been 2 years. It continues. They carry that. That's why we do the celebration of remembrance. So seeing that type of thing, seeing some people who really never recover because their child is everything. Seeing some people whose children were born with some level of, I hate using the word disability, but something that disables their ability to fully live, and realizing that there's this emptiness that can't be filled with their time or their heart, because taking care of that child was their life. And so seeing people, you know, kind of redefine themselves, find life again, all of those things. They say that, I've heard parents say that when your child dies, it's like joining a sorority or a fraternity that nobody else ever wants to pledge in college. There's just it, and seeing families connect with other families that have had like experiences. No experience is the same, but seeing them have like experiences to lean on each other, to support each other, because you see it on all levels. Some people have very spiritual experiences. Some people rely on their faith, and some people literally just never come back around. It literally, for lack of a better word, cripples them forever. They never rebound from it. And then I've seen men and women grieve very, very differently. And so one of the other things that has stuck with me, I had one family whose child died. They did not start grief support till 2 years later. 2 years after their child died. It took them that long to even come to needing the help and support. So realizing that it's going to be different. There is no cookie cutter approach. We see it all from people who are very shut down and stoic, and then some people who are very expressive and emotive, but realizing that family, that mother, that father, that sister, that brother will never be the same again. They are a different person after experiencing this profound loss, because it's profound.
I think you hit on something there, and I want to expound on it a little bit. Grief is very different for each individual. When my mother-in-law died, I guess 2018, so what's that, 7 years ago, I was very judged for the way that I grieved. And I guess it kind of left a negative connotation for grief for me in some ways. But because I had experienced so much death and so much disparity in my line of work, I kind of have adopted the mentality that death is kind of a continuation of life. And I'm a very religious guy. So that's easy for me to say, but it's hard for people to understand how I can be that way. And our last guest said something that's kind of stuck with me. We keep wanting to normalize that it's okay to not be okay, and it totally is, but it's also okay to be okay. It is okay to maybe not handle grief the way the public thinks you should handle grief. So I really love that you put that in there. That is part of the deal.
Yeah, when I do some of my grief talks, particularly when I'm speaking at a church, because there's so many different religious platitudes and so many different religious perspectives on grief. I always start with, I always knew everybody had to die, but I didn't know everybody had to die until my mother died. That was when it became real for me. And so
I feel that.
Yeah. And so when my mother died, it was one thing, but that experience helped me, because that was the deepest thing I'd ever experienced. Even my father has also died, but it was really, the loss of my mother and the loss of my father were two very different losses for different reasons. And I had great relationships and close relationships with both of them. But so we take our own experiences we take our previous grief experiences into other experiences of loss. And so we're going to handle each one different, and some will trigger more in us than others. And so even in not being okay, that is okay. And even in being okay, that's okay, because we are all going to experience it very, very differently. And so it's easy to judge what you would do until it happens to you. And we don't have an emotional response to everybody's grief, but the ones that trigger us or something, we do.
Kim, I'm going to call you out because I know you so well. You have dealt with the grief of losing a parent as well. And your grief with losing a parent was very similar to my grief when I lost my mom. And you don't have to go into great detail. You can go into just the detail you'd like to, but I'd like for you to talk about that, and then I'll piggyback off it. And let's hear what Sarita has to say, because I think it will be a very interesting take to talk about our personal lives a little bit in that way.
So I think when I lost my mom, I didn't expect the reaction of myself that I was anticipating. I actually did not have a good relationship with my mom, even though I tried. So she was type 2 bipolar. She would occasionally medicate and be okay, but then as soon as she felt better, she would come off from her meds because she felt better. And so I dealt with that the majority of my life. We kind of had one of those push-pull type relationships that was very insecure. And so when I lost her, all of these years, I had tried very hard to mend and have a good relationship with her, because I think every child wants a good relationship with their parents. I never got that. So when she died, I wasn't grieving like the loss of, I think, what others would probably experience as like a good relationship, like, oh, I'm going to miss her. I'm going to miss having her around for holidays. I'm going to miss the support. I never had that. So I more or less grieved the loss of what I didn't have, because it felt so final. When she passed away, it was like, this is it. Like, I have no other chances. There's no chance to mend anything. And so I kind of got left with an open book that I'm still, and Kevin knows, struggling with to close.
And really, it's the same for me, because my mother was a lifelong drug addict and she died last year, and we never had a relationship. And that was more so because of me. Well, we had a relationship when I was a child, but an adult relationship, we never had that. And that was mostly because of me and being protective of my well-being, my family's well-being. It was just not an amicable thing that we could be together without some type of strife. So I was very protective of my family and myself. And then but there was always that option there. So when I grieved my mother's death, I was very surprised by that, because it was constantly I don't know if you say hatred was the right word, but there was certainly that disconnect there, that I didn't want that. I would be fine if I never saw her again. That kind of self-talk that I would tell myself. But then when she actually passed away, I was very grieved by it. And it was so surprising, because the option wasn't there any longer. So I think that's kind of something that you can delve into a little bit, because I think of you as a very high level professional in your field. I love everything you do. I watch your TikToks and your LinkedIn stuff and all that stuff. So I'm just as excited to have you here as somebody that has 90,000 TikTok followers.
Wow.
You are
Thank you.
highly favored in my opinion.
I appreciate that. And thank you both for sharing. I think you both hit on some valid points. A couple of things, and I said this a little while ago, you never know how you're going to respond. You never know what is going to trigger in you, what is going to tap into you. And we all have this shadow work, all of this thing, all of the shadow that we live in from our childhood that has probably gone unaddressed, especially like in situations with the two of you where you didn't have opportunity because of the influence of drugs or something external, mental health. All of those things go into that. And so I think part of us always wants to go back to that childhood mother relationship, father relationship that we, for whatever reason, did not get. And because we've put all these boundaries, we've put all these layers, we've put all these masks on it to protect ourselves, to protect our feelings, that internal childlike, I want my mother, I want my father, I want this relationship is always laying under the surface somewhere. And it's not until, like you both said, it becomes final that you realize I've lost this person forever. This is it. And so even in those spaces that we think are unhealthy, it's still loss.
Yeah.
And we can't negate the importance of loss. A loss is a loss, whether it's, and even if it's a hard or unhealthy loss, it's still a loss. Whether it's a loss and all of the things that we don't realize are associated with that person that now dies that we never get the chance to do again. It's like the fifth grader who never gets the graduation, the mother loses or the family loses all that. It's the same as adults. We just don't, we forget to think of it in those terms, and we've been socialized not to think of it in those terms. But it's still very buried beneath the surface, and all of those things that we never thought we'd feel come to surface when things become final.
Vice Sarita, do you think, and I know this is vulnerable, do you honor that broken child as an adult? Do you give that broken child space to grieve and feel all of those things instead of trying to be the stoic adult that has everything together?
Yes, I think you have to, because otherwise it transfers into your healthy relationships. And so as a parent, as a grandparent, as a sister, as a brother, as a colleague, as a friend, if you don't address those broken places in yourself, then you never get the holistic wellness and care that you need to get. Something is always masked, something is always lying beneath the surface, something is always unhealed. And so I think we owe it to ourselves to do the self-work, to do the grief work, to do the hard work, to be able to heal from the traumatic and grief things that we have layered up, and we've built these boundaries and these walls around it in our adulthood. Because if we start to tap into our married relationships, our relationships with our spouse, our relationships with our young children and our adult children, and then we start to look back, we realize I'm this way with my children because of the way that happened with me. Or I'm this way with my spouse because I saw how my mother or my father interacted with in their relationships. And so we have all of that unaddressed, and it becomes part of the fabric of who we are without even knowing why.
And I literally hate that about myself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll say something to my son, I'm like, oh, I sound like my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Or I do something, I'm like, that's something Dad would have done that I used to hate.
Yeah.
You know, I always said I wouldn't be the I told you so dad. And I have a 4-year-old whose favorite question is why. And eventually it gets down to where I'm out of answers. So it's just, I told you so. And I just grimace every time I do it.
I will just say this. I'm not a big Oprah fan, but she has a book with Dr. Perry called What Happened to You. And really I do audiobooks, and listening to that book about all of the traumatic things, that different case studies they talked about, it always went back to the foundation of how a child was nurtured, in their formative years. And we don't realize, we never think about, even as we're raising our children, how much of the way we were nurtured, what we were taught, what we heard, and what we saw influence who we become. And so we just think we are who we are because we're just walking around on God's green earth. But there's a reason, because we were exposed or not exposed to something early in life.
So what do you think? Okay, so we're healthcare professionals, and I'm sure there's a lot of us broken healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing to say is that sometimes a lot of us go into this field to be the person we needed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's true for me, because I never really had a lot of people to lean on, and I always wanted to be that for other people. I didn't want somebody to feel alone or feel like no one cared or loved them. because I felt that way. I think after a certain amount of time, and I know that I'm starting to experience this 14 years into healthcare, I have become jaded.
Mm.
I used to be a very open, vulnerable person, and I'm very guarded now. And I think a lot of that has to do with repeated trauma exposure. I also believe a lot of that has to do with childhood trauma. After so long, you tend to not want to feel hurt anymore, and you stop being as vulnerable as what you used to be. But there's a cost that comes with that. There's a price. And the price is I don't feel as happy as what I used to because I'm not as open and loving, as vulnerable as I used to be. And that's inherently who I am deep down. And I think sometimes I tend to grapple with, I should be that person again, but should I be that person again? Because after you've spent so many years going through traumatic events and hurt, you kind of tend to numb yourself down. And I can honestly say I don't do that with, drugs or alcohol. I have just tempered my emotions enough to be numb because I'm tired of being hurt so much.
Yeah.
Is there any good advice or way to bring yourself back out of that box and be willing to love and be vulnerable and not fear more?
That I like that. That's good. One is realizing that as you know, that is a trauma response or a response to the pain or the burnout, and it's a way that we protect ourselves, and it's very common amongst our colleagues and what we do. You said one word, and that was willing. Are you willing to be more vulnerable? Because part of what we do, and part of the human experience, and part of empathy, is being willing to allow ourselves to be empathetic again, and to care again, and to show our care, because we do care. And it's all layered up under all this hurt from, what we see, realizing that love and grief are two sides of the same coin. So the more we love, the more we grieve, and the more we grieve, it's because of the harder we love. But the question is, one, are you willing? Are you willing to be vulnerable again? Because that's the first thing. And once you decide whether you are or not, or if you choose to be willing, then you have to allow yourself, you don't have to open yourself up to everybody in every situation, but you allow yourself to form a healthy connection to patients, to be able to be empathetic, to be able to be compassionate, to be able to see them as human, not just a patient chart or a number or a child that has been through this or exposed to this traumatic event, but to see the humanity in them and to see the humanity in those families, realizing these are people that live in our communities, in our neighborhood, and we all bleed the same blood. And so being willing to see the human element and allowing ourselves to unlayer some of those things. So the key word, Kim, is what you said, willing. How willing are you? And then once you decide that you're willing, then you can step into that space again.
It's kind of odd. I tend to have the compassion and care and love for my patients. Where I tend to withdraw is from family and friends because of the damage that I think I've incurred doing this job. And I don't feel like when I go home, I'm still trying to process through everything that has happened. And I think it's compounded itself over time. And I think and especially like me and Kevin's talked about it a lot. We both kind of came into EMS and the medical field at a time where the expectation was, we don't talk about this. Everything's fine. You're fine. I'm fine. And so for 14 years, I've never sought counseling to deal with anything. And I think right now I'm feeling the repercussions of that. And I don't feel like myself. I still feel all the compassion and love, like I said, for my patients, but I don't want to be as close to other people outside of work, I guess, because I don't feel like myself. And
you don't want to hurt. And that's where you hurt the most.
Right.
With the people we love. Yeah. And I think that's the culture of healthcare. And most of us grew up in that culture of blocking, grew up in that culture of sarcasm, black humor, all of that. But I think now we are more aware that it's not as healthy as it once we were taught that it was. And so recognizing that it's not good for us, it's not healthy, and allowing ourselves, we have to be, I heard someone say years ago, and this has stuck with me literally for over 25 years, are you willing to be willing? And, looking for ways to reconnect and not isolate and not detach from the people we love, because they need us just as much as our patients need us. And there's a book I read not too long ago called Grief on the Front Lines. And it's about healthcare workers and their grief, and how even in nursing school and medical school, EMS, all those different places, we are taught to not deal with grief. We are taught to to put up these barriers and these walls and to block it and to avoid it and to not address it. But we have to in order for ourselves to be healthy. And so when we look at our families versus our patients, it always feels safer with our patients because we could go home. Mm-hmm. But when we go home, those are the people that really need us, that really love us. And, part of the pain we feel is pushing them away. And so we have to allow ourselves to spend that extra time on ourselves and find those safe spaces to debrief, decompress, and release all that so we can help love our families in healthy ways.
And I also think that what you just kind of described, and you'll recognize this word, this transferred grief. We kind of take on the grief of our patients. We kind of take on the grief of our families. But even hanging on to that, like Kim's talking about doing for all these years and kind of withdrawing from family, it really highlights a need for a holistic approach, the whole mind, body, spirit kind of approach, not just for patients and families, but for our providers too, for everybody involved in the care of that child or the care of that patient, to have a holistic approach. So how do spiritual resilience, social connections, traditional mental health support, all those things create a truly holistic approach to coping with all the things we see in our line of work?
I think one of the things we don't do well in our line of work is use the psychosocial support that's around us: chaplains, social workers, child life providers, psychologists, and using the language. There's a big push now for trauma-informed care.
Yes.
And we use that with our patients and families, but we don't use that with each other. We all come in the door to work every day with something invisible happening behind us, some reason why something has shaken us, some event that we've experienced that informs how we provide support, how we engage each other. And so learning to be trauma-informed in how we deal with each other, and then realizing that we are multidimensional in our personhood. We are spirit, soul, and body. That means we have to do something spiritually for ourselves. We have to do things socially for ourselves, and we have to do things physically for ourselves to take care of ourselves as we live every day. So addressing our spiritual well-being, it might be a nature walk. It might be reading a book. It might just be taking a deep breath. Addressing our social support, meaning that spending time with the people we care about and love, having social connections, talking through these things with people who've experienced these adverse events with us, because they will understand the most before we take it home. And then physically taking care of our health, because everybody knows that once you're in a profession, you are the worst patient person in that profession in terms of taking care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you see hairdressers whose hair doesn't look good, and you see physicians and healthcare providers who don't take their own advice. And so all of those things matter, but trauma-informed care and caring for ourselves, realizing that we've all experienced some form of trauma, and being gentle and easy with ourselves and with each other. Yeah. But taking advantage of, one of the things that a lot of chaplains and a lot of spiritual care social workers do well, I've been watching that show, The Pit.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I've noticed is that every episode, have you talked to the social worker? They can help you process this. And they never say, have you talked to the chaplain? They can help you process this. So I'm like, I want to write that show. Yeah. But realizing that we have resources. And so instead of saying, no, I'm fine, I'm good, saying, hey, yes, I want to, take advantage of this moment. Can appreciating that time that those our colleagues in other disciplines are there for the patients and families, but also for staff.
If you know Sarita, she's the queen of motivational quotes and really giving us something to drive for. So if you had something to say to our audience that is filled with nurses, doctors, law enforcement, fire department, dispatchers, all these first line folks, what would you say to them?
Wow, Kevin.
I know, put you on the spot. I love it.
Woo!
She didn't research for that one.
Yeah. One of the things that I live by, it's not so profound, but this is one of the things that I really try to live by, and it helps to try to keep me from judging. Don't say what you won't do until it happens to you.
There you go.
And so I try not to judge how other people respond. Just because it's not my response or is not what I would do does not mean it's not okay. And so I think that's one of the things. And just to allow yourself to be whatever it is in that moment, be present with yourself as much as you are present with everybody else, so that you can tap into what you need as a person, your own self-awareness, And then the third thing is that everything has a spiritual connotation. It's not faith, it's not religion, but it's spirit. And what gives you, being true to what puts your feet on the floor every day, what makes you keep coming back every day, what gives you meaning, what gives you joy, and where you find gratitude, and tapping into that every single day.
Very good. So what have you got going on? Where can our listeners find stuff from you? Where can they find your devotionals or motivation from that you have, and that smile that we love so much?
Thank you. Stay tuned. I'm working on a book of all these devotions that I do, and I'm on all social platforms. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Threads, I'm on Facebook, I'm on all the things.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy watching you. Sarita, thank you for joining us. This has been Reverend Dr. Sarita Wilson-Anderson, correct? Is that all your titles?
That is all me.
Okay. I love it.
That is all me.
Kim, you got anything to add before we wrap up?
I'm just so thankful that you were able to join us, and I found all of your advice very, very helpful, and I hope that our listeners do too.
Thank you both. I have enjoyed this time. Y'all, and I appreciate your questions. Y'all have some deep questions. That's good. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, we've got some deep ones. So thanks.
But I appreciate that.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us. You can always follow us on TikTok, the Facebook, of course, the Facebook. I'm like a little old man, the Facebook. You can follow us on Facebook, TikTok. You can find us anywhere you find your podcast, and we hope that you're a subscriber. If not, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment. It's really important that we get those. It lets all the platforms know that this is good content, that this is something you would like to continue hearing and have pushed out to others. So thanks, everybody, for listening. You can find us in all those places. Kim, hit them with the slogan.
As always, be safe, take care of your mind, and we'll talk soon.